Let's go through the steps that are required to make a preset for a given listening position. What I'll do is make a preset that's designed for me, sitting in the center of the sofa, which is actually the sweet spot in this room, sitting alone, listening to music. To begin, what we'll do is open up the app, and I've already made sure that my phone is on exactly the same wireless network as the loudspeakers. When we first open up the app for the first time, what you'll see is that there are 3 presets that are already installed. One is called narrow, one is called wide, and the other is called omni. Those are the factory defaults, and what we'll do is begin by editing one of those. In order to edit one, what we have to do is press the 3 dots at the top right-hand side of the screen, and that then brings us to a screen where we can choose which one we're going to edit. For today, we'll edit the narrow one. So we go in. The first thing we're going to do is rename it, and I'm going to call this music listening. So I'll just rename music listening and save it. That then brings us to our 3 main headings. We can control the beam under the beam control menu. We can create a new room compensation filter by doing a number of measurements, and we have some advanced features, and we'll go through each of these individually. Now we'll click on the beam control, which will move us over to the menu where we can adjust not only the direction and beam width of the loudspeaker, but also a number of other parameters. We can see on the top of the screen here that we're controlling the beam width and the beam direction in one area. So that's done with the graphics at the top. The segment, which looks like a pizza slice in the middle, that indicates the narrow beam. And then the ring around that with the 5 arcs, that's our wide beam, and that can be rotated in one of 5 directions. And finally, the outside ring is for selecting the omni mode. Because we're editing what was a narrow factory default, it's already in narrow mode, so we don't have to change it. We can see that the master and the slave are both in narrow mode, and I can do that by swiping the top of the screen left and right. So we can see the master and the slave. Both speakers must be in the same beam width at the same time. So you can't have one in narrow and one in wide. But they can have different directions. So one can be wide front and the other can be wide right, for example. If we look lower then, we can see that the master currently is set to the left speaker roll. That means it's going to play the left channel. And if I swipe, I can see the slave is automatically set to right. If I change the master to right, then the slave will automatically update to the other channel. And we can also see the distance and the level are stated here. I've already measured the distance from my listening position in the middle of the sofa to each loudspeaker, and I found out that that's 4.9 meters. So I'll set that here for the master and for the slave. 4.9 in both cases. Of course, if I was sitting somewhere else, those distances would be different. And because I'm the same distance from both speakers in the situation where I'm setting up this preset, then the level will be the same for both, so I don't need to adjust that. Now we hit the arrow on the top left, and that brings us back to our menu of headings for the preset. So now that we've set up all of the beam control parameters, the beam width, the beam direction, the speaker distance, and the speaker level, the next step is to make an active room compensation measurement, which will help us to build a filter for the zone that we'll be listening in. In order to do that, we'll have to use the microphone, which means we'll have to go over and plug it into the master speaker. So now we go into the room compensation menu, and because we have factory defaults installed in the loudspeakers, there are no room compensation filters active yet. We haven't made one. So we'll create a new one by pressing the plus sign, and the first thing it asks us to do is to name this zone that we'll be listening in. I'm going to call this Sofa Center. And notice that this is not the same name as the listening preset, which I called Music Listening. So now that we've entered this page, we can see some information about how to do the measurement. At the top of the page, it shows us where to put the microphone if we're making an active room compensation or ARC zone for only one person. And we'll go through that as we do this measurement. On the bottom of the page, it shows you how to place the microphone for a larger ARC zone where you have more than one listener. What we'll need to do now is check and see where we put the microphone. It tells us to place it at the listening position, so we'll have to go over and move the microphone to be in the same position as my head when I'm actually sitting and listening to music. Now I've placed my microphone in the listening position as I was instructed on the page here. And if I scroll to the bottom, I can see there's a button that I hit to start the measurement procedure. When I do that, I'll hear a sequence of 22 sine sweeps or noises coming out of the 2 loudspeakers. This will take in total about 1.5 minutes per speaker, so about 3 minutes to do the entire procedure. It's smartest to try and keep as quiet as possible during this measurement procedure in order to not conflict with or infect the measurements and therefore get some of the wrong answers when you're trying to make the filters. I'll hit the button and then we'll listen to those sweeps. So now the first set of measurements is done. We'll have to do this again twice more with 2 different microphone positions. The second one will be slightly behind the listening position and slightly higher. So I'll go move the microphone and then come back to start the measurement. So now the microphone is in the second position, and I just need to start the measurements again and listen to those 22 sweeps. The second measurement has now been done for the second microphone position. Now I'll go and move the mic to the third position, which is slightly in front of and slightly lower than the listening position. And then I'll come back and start the measurements again. So now we'll just start the microphone measurements again. Now all 3 measurement sets have been done, and what we'll go in to the app and do is to save the measurements. Notice that what we've done now is to actually save the measurements. We haven't made a filter yet, and that's because the filter that we make is dependent on other settings in the speaker, most importantly the beam direction and the beam width control. So that filter is not made from the measurements until we turn it on, and we do that at this point in the procedure. Now we can see that we've saved our measurements for the listening zone that we've created, which we've called sofa center. And we can now apply that room compensation measurement to create a filter for our listening preset. I do that by selecting the toggle on the right-hand side of the screen. And immediately what will happen is that we'll get a progress bar show up. What it's doing now is using the measurements that we did to create a custom filter for this preset. The important thing to remember here is that the actual filter is made to be dependent on the beam width and the beam direction of the loudspeakers. So once this is finished, it will be applied to the settings that we already have. But if we go and change, for example, change from narrow to wide, then it will have to do this calculation again. However, that filter that it's now created, and you can see now that it's finished, that will be saved with the preset. So if you're changing presets later, it doesn't have to do this calculation again. That's all saved. We can now go back, now that we've applied this room compensation filter to the preset, and the only thing left to look at is the advanced menu items. There are only two here. When we go into the advanced items, we see that there's a latency mode and a speaker preset. We'll look at latency mode first. In order to do all of the processing that's done by BeoLab 90, it takes some time for the computer to do all the work. In fact, from the time the signal comes into the speaker to the time it comes out is 1/10 of a second. This is too long to be able to maintain lip sync with a television or a surround sound system, for example. So, in the latency mode, you can change the latency or the delay of the loudspeaker to low by clicking on the toggle on the bottom. What this does is it reduces the amount of delay in the speaker to maintain lip sync with a television that isn't made by Bang & Olufsen. The disadvantage of this is that you lose some of the precision of the beam width and the beam direction control, specifically in the low frequency region. But it's important to remember that this is just for maintaining lip sync with a television. If you're only listening to music, then there's nothing that you have to sync with, and so you can put the loudspeakers into high latency mode, and what that does is gives you the best possible performance in terms of sound from the loudspeaker, the cost of which, of course, is that extra delay. If you have a Bang & Olufsen television, then that TV is able to manage this latency change automatically, and then you want to put the latency mode into auto. What this does is it tells the loudspeaker that the external television, the BeoVision television, can manage the delay, switching back and forth between low and high as is needed. So for example, television channels, it may switch automatically into low latency mode, whereas if you go to a music source on the television, then it will automatically switch to high latency and give you the best performance possible. At this point, we're basically finished setting up the preset. I'll just back up by one menu by hitting the arrow in the top left-hand side. You can see that there's one more item here, and that's the speaker preset number. We can't change that. That's just a reference number that we can use later when we're setting up speaker groups on the BeoVision television. If I now back out again by pressing the top left arrow, then I'll come out of the edit mode and I can see the preset is now being used, so it's what I'm listening to in the speakers, and it can be selected at any time. Now we'll make a new speaker preset for a very different listening position. I'm sitting here in my chair, which is off to the side of the two loudspeakers, not down the middle of the room. So we'll have to do some very different settings to optimize for this position. I'm already in the edit mode, so that can be seen by the fact that there's a check mark on the top right hand side of the screen. I'll just press the plus sign, and the first thing it will do is ask me to name the preset, and I'll call this reading chair and save it. We'll then go in and edit the parameters. I'll set my beam control to aim the beam off to the side of the loudspeaker, so I'm in wide mode and coming out of the left front of the speaker, and that's basically aimed here at this chair, and I'll make sure that's happened for both the master and the slave loudspeaker. In addition, I'll have to set the speaker distance to the correct numbers. I've already measured that with a laser. So the master speaker is 5.2 meters away, and the slave is 2.0 meters away. In addition, I'll also need to drop the level of the closest speaker, and that's simply because it's too close. I've already measured that, and I know that it will have to come 7 decibels down. What this does is to adjust the level of the two loudspeakers so that sitting in this position they appear to be the same level, and that ensures that my lead vocal or anything that's in the center of the stereo image still appears to be in the center of the two loudspeakers, which also happens to align with the position of my television. Now that we've done the beam direction, the distance, and the level, we'll come back out of this menu and go into the room compensation. I've already made a room compensation measurement with 3 microphone positions, one here at the center of my head, one slightly in front, and one slightly behind. And those 3 microphone positions, I've called those chair, and I'll now select that for this preset, and we'll see that it will make the filter. Now it's ready. And because I'm going to be primarily sitting in this position to listen to music, I'll set my latency mode to high. Then I'll come out of the edit mode, and now I've made a preset just for this listening position in my reading chair. We'll now make one final preset, which is a party mode, which will use the entire room as the listening position. I've already entered the edit mode, and again we can see that from the check mark in the top right hand side. I'll press the plus button and call this party. And save it. I'll enter that mode, and for my beam control I'll now make that omnidirectional, which is my party mode for the loudspeakers. I'll also set the distance for both loudspeakers to 1 meter, and I'll do this for the master and the slave. And the reason for that is that we don't really have a listening position. And finally, we'll set the level for both loudspeakers to 0 dB. I'll just go over and make sure that's true. Yes. We'll now set the room compensation filter for this preset by entering the room compensation menu. I've already made 3 room compensation measurements. One was done in the center of the sofa for our sweet spot. Those were 3 very close microphone positions in the middle of the sofa. One was for the entire sofa for a family movie watching experience, and for that I measured the center of the sofa for 1 microphone position and then the 2 ends of the sofa for the other 2. And I made a 3rd measurement for my active room compensation over here in the listening chair. What I can do is combine those 3 different measurement sets to make one setting, one filter for the entire room for a party mode. What I'll do is click all of those on, and therefore use all 9 of those measurements, 3 times 3 microphone settings, to create one filter that can be used for the party setting. Essentially what I'm doing is using as many measurements as possible to create one filter for the entire room. And of course this will take some time to calculate. Note that you can make up to 5 different ARC or active room compensation zones, so that's 5 sets of 3 measurements for different positions in the room, and you can combine up to 3 of those sets to make one filter for a preset. That's done now, so I can go back out, and I'm finished making my party preset. Now that we've created all of our presets inside the BeoLab 90, we'll move over to the BeoVision television to make speaker groups and use those presets in part of our configuration. I've already entered the sound menu on the television. The first thing I have to do is go into the speaker connections to ensure that we have the correct speakers indicated to the system. As you can see here, I've got 2 BeoLab 90s connected, 2 BeoLab 5s, and those are in my surround positions, and the BeoVision 12 in this case as my center speaker. So this is correct. I'll go back out, and now what we'll want to do is make a speaker group. We'll enter the first one, and the first thing we'll do is make our speaker roles. What we'll do to begin with is to make a speaker group for watching television. So for that, I'll want to watch in surround sound. I'll set my 2 BeoLab 90s to left front and right front. I'll set my BeoLab 5s to left surround and right surround. And I'll set my BeoVision 12 center speaker to center front. So now I have a surround sound system, and the base management for the LFE channel will automatically be routed to the most powerful loudspeakers in the system that we have, which is of course the BeoLab 90s. I can now store this, and that will bring us back up one menu. From there, I'll now set my speaker distances. Now, although we've already set the distances in the speaker preset on the BeoLab 90s, that will be overridden by the television. We don't want to do the delay compensation twice. So I have a distance of 4.9 meters to the left front speaker, 4.9 meters to the right front loudspeaker. The left surround speaker is quite close. It's 1.1 meters away, as is the right surround loudspeaker. So we have a symmetrical configuration. And the center front loudspeaker is slightly further away. It's 5.0 meters from the listening position. So remember, if you set the distances in the speaker preset on the BeoLab 90s, you will also have to do that in the television, and the television will automatically override that setting in the speaker preset. We'll now go in and set the speaker levels. We have to do some adjustment here because our BeoLab 90s are slightly close to the walls and the BeoLab 5s are actually away from the walls a little bit. What I'll do in this particular case, because I've already done my measurement, I know that I need to drop the BeoLab 5s in the back by 2.5 dB, and I actually need to raise the center front by 1 dB. This I've done already using a sound pressure level meter, but we don't need to go through that in this video, and I'll store that. Finally, we have to set the speaker preset, and this is what will automate the selection of the preset in the BeoLab 90s to associate with the speaker group in the BeoVision television. We'll go into the speaker preset menu. Because here I'm making a configuration for watching television on the sofa with my family or my friends, I'm going to use the speaker preset that we made in the BeoLab 90s for general listening, and that was the one with the wide setting, the wide beam width. That one I've already checked using the advanced menu in the app, and that's told me that the speaker preset number is 2. So I set that here in the speaker group on the BeoVision television. What that means is that when I select this speaker group on the TV, it will automatically select preset number 2 in the BeoLab 90s and therefore set up the correct beam width, beam direction for my listening position. And that's it. We can now go back and that speaker group has been set up. I hope this video has provided an introduction on how to set up and configure your BeoLab 90s as well as a configuration with the BeoVision television. For more detailed information, I recommend that you download the technical sound guides, both for the BeoLab 90 and for the BeoVision television series, and those are available on the Bang & Olufsen website under the support pages. Those technical sound guides also include some tips and tricks to help you set up the speakers a little more efficiently when you're doing the configuration. Thanks for watching.